local and national stories that touch your life. The Jared Goodell Show. 99.9 FM and 1370 WFEA.
8:35, good morning to you. Jared Goodell alongside, waking you up on a Monday morning. Back from the weekend, back to the work week. Lots going on this morning. Friday afternoon, the big breaking story was a verdict was reached in the Owen Labrie case. This was the 19-year-old student who was accused of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old girl up at St. Paul's, prestigious private school. He was found not guilty of felony rapes, guilty on a few other counts of misdemeanor sexual assault charges. It's an interesting case that has gained national attention, certainly local attention. A lot of debate about if the jury got it right, did they get it wrong? And what does this mean for future rape cases in the state of New Hampshire? Rusty Chadwick, the former first assistant to the Hillsborough County attorney for some 10 years, now in private practice at his law firm in Nashua. Chadwick, Verzano, and Weber joins us on the phone line this morning. Good morning, Rusty.
Good morning.
So this is a big case. It's gotten national attention. It was followed very closely by national media for a few weeks. Jury finding last Friday that Owen Labrie, the prep school graduate, not guilty of felony sexual assault, but is guilty of misdemeanor sexual assault against that 15-year-old freshman girl. What does that mean? What is the difference between felony sexual assault and misdemeanor sexual assault?
The difference is the application of physical force. The age of consent in New Hampshire is 16. So this girl, at the time this happened, they were 15 and 18. So she was always under the age of consent. So under the law, even if she wanted to engage in sex, she was unable to legally. So that's what makes it a crime on a misdemeanor level. It becomes a felony if she's under the age of 13 or if there's some sort of force going on, and so it becomes an aggravated felonious sexual assault, which carries not only a 10 to 20 potential penalty in a state prison, but also, it's what we would call colloquially a rape case.
So isn't there a law, if I understand this right, or in the law in the books, there is like a 3-year law, right, where if a person is 15, they can have sex with somebody who's 3 years older. Is that right, or is that incorrect?
It is correct. For years, prosecutors and defense lawyers struggled with the classic example, which is part of where the debate in this case is: two teenagers, one slightly older, one's either of age or especially underage. They engage in sex. It becomes public knowledge. Now, what do? Does a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old end up with a felony conviction? And nowadays, obviously, sexual registration. And so the law has been increasing, curiously, and I think properly, the time or the distance, the age difference between the parties. It was 3 years. There's actually exceptions in the law from 4 years to 5 years, depending upon the type of action in play. And, those of us in the legal business throw around sexual terms without really thinking about it, because we have to deal with it every day. But basically, if there's penetration, that's always what changes the level of penalty. And if there's not penetration but there's sexual contact, that changes it. And so a 4-year difference with penetration can be a felony, but it can also not be based on, it kind of gives people an out. And also, there's a 5-year difference for people to engage just in sexual contact without penetration. And that was part of the defense in this case, that there was a lot of fooling around, but there wasn't penetration.
Right. Rusty Chadwick with us, former first assistant to the Hillsborough County attorney, now in private practice at his law firm, Chadwick, Verzano, and Weber in Nashua. We're talking about the Owen Labrie trial here. Very interesting facts. And we heard the testimony. I followed this case very closely. And there was interesting testimony from the accuser and then from Owen Labrie himself, where these two were kind of in a flirtatious relationship for a few weeks, friendship you might call it, but they were emailing, texting back and forth about about meeting up and, a lot of, innocent flirting in there. But that really, that flirting really ended up being what sealed the deal for Owen Labrie, right? I mean, he was found guilty of luring a minor over the internet.
Right, and that statute is anyone. There aren't any age exceptions under that statute for teenagers who want to talk dirty online. There are no exceptions to that as there are under the sexual assault statutes. And so years ago I ran an internet task force where we down in Hillsborough County South, we made 50, 60 arrests of people trying to come pick up 13, 14-year-old girls. That statute was specifically designed and amended to allow, to say, look, even if it's not a real person, it's still a crime to do that. Those texts, black and white, are what put the jury had no choice, really, but to convict him of those charges because everybody was reading those charges. They were put up for the jury to see. It's clearly what his intent was, and he was clearly guilty under the law. That raises a bigger question of whether he should be and whether that statute was designed for people like him.
All right, so 9 men on this jury, 3 women, and probably going through the mind of a lot of these guys, and maybe even some of these women on this jury, maybe they have a son, and they're thinking about their 17-year-old, 18-year-old son who might be in high school, and he has a freshman girlfriend, and maybe they're engaging in having sex. What does this mean for those high school relationships now? An 18-year-old, a senior who's dating a freshman, and they engage in sexual acts together. Does that now mean that this is a crime? If the girl's parents find out, the girl is consenting to it, she's engaging in this, and then her parents find out, they're not happy, they go to the police. Is this a dangerous place for juniors and seniors in high school to be dating, having sex with younger underclassmen?
I have a feeling, at least for the next year or two, in New Hampshire, there will be a lot of people that won't be allowed to go to the prom together. Because, yes, the laws are very clear. If she's underage and you're not, you have a problem. And we all know things are going to happen. But, when I was prosecuting and I got called on circumstances like this, where it's really not a legal judgment call, but a social judgment call, my question always was, number one, would this be a crime in Wyoming? Because we like to think of ourselves as that independent in New Hampshire. And more importantly, would this have been a crime when we were growing up? And when the law has become stricter, and so it really does, it is driven by the angry parent many times. The kids will oftentimes, the victim oftentimes wants nothing to do with it. The flip side of that is, what you could hear from the testimony in this case is that in hindsight, this girl realized the pressure that was put on her and realized all of that entire culture and what that did to her. And so in hindsight, I think she could see a lot of things she probably would not have done but for the pressure.
Rusty Chadwick with us this morning. We're talking about the Labrie trial here. The verdict came down last Friday from the jury, and a very interesting verdict, but one that I predicted would happen, that he would not be found guilty of felony rape, and he wasn't. He was found guilty of some misdemeanor sexual assault charges and for using a computer to lure an underage girl for the purpose of sexual acts. What's next for Owen Labrie? He faces up to 11 years in jail, but that's something that he might not get.
Yeah, these are very difficult, for a judge to sentence here. There will be tremendous pressure on both sides. It will never be enough for the victim and her family, and it's already too much for, Owen Labrie. And, there is the likelihood of a House of Correction sentence, meaning something in the 12-month and under range, I think is very, very likely. I think it would be hard for a judge on these charges, under these circumstances, to find that a state prison sentence is appropriate. The bigger problem for Owen Labrie is that he will have to register as a sex offender for life. There is an ability, after I believe it's 15 years or so, for him to petition to be removed. But that is oftentimes the biggest hindrance, and oftentimes why people plead out to charges like this that don't require registration.
Right. Because he's going to be registered as a sex offender when he goes to apply for a job. I mean, everyone knows his name already. It's going to be
knows his
name. It's going to be tough for this guy.
The big issue too, I wonder when you look at the judges oftentimes if someone takes the stand, if the judge in this case did not find him credible, and I think one of the big issues in this case, you have the computers, you have the DNA evidence, and then you have his talking to his friends or his so-called admissions that are easily dismissible as a bunch of teenage boy bragging. But if the judge feels that he was not truthful, that could easily enhance his sentence. That's an unknown factor to be known only on the day of sentencing, and judges will address that.
Rusty, one last question for you here before we let you go. What about the victim and her family? Probably a civil lawsuit in the works already against the school, against St. Paul's.
I would imagine that they will do something along the lines of failure to protect. But again, all of these things that came into play for the jury's determination, will come into play in that case. And that, I think, will take years, and it's probably likely, no matter what, that it would be one of those, to be settled out of court, private settlement. Right. No one's going to talk about it.
We're not going to hear how much money changes hands there. Rusty Chadwick, always a pleasure to have you on the program here. Your law firm out in Nashua, Chadwick, Frisano, and Weber. What's your website if people want to retain your services in criminal defense and family law?
Sure. If you just look up New Hampshire attorneys, New Hampshire criminal attorneys, they will find us, or Chadwick, Frisano, and Weber. We are pretty active. We have a lot of cases. They'll be able to pull up articles about us and see us. We do criminal law, family law, and we love what we do, and we take pride in our personalized service. So,
very good, Rusty.
I look forward to talking to some of your listeners, and it's always a pleasure to come on and discuss these issues with you.
Thank you, Rusty Chadwick. We'll talk to you again soon. I'm sure there'll be other cases. Again, Rusty Chadwick there from Chadwick, Frisano, and Weber out in Nashua, practicing criminal defense and family law. Very interesting case when it comes to that of Owen Labrie. What's next? Sentencing in October. And it'll surface again. The story will surface again, the national story there. More to come this morning. We'll talk about life on Mars. It's possible. 8:47 now on WFEA. Good morning.
More Jared after the break.